Hello and welcome. Konbanwa, annyeonghaseyo, ni hao, hola, bonjour, namaste. Thank you for joining us for this Pan-Asia session, Women in Business During the Global Pandemic, Challenges and Opportunities. My name is Unja Yu, Senior Director of International Alumni Engagement and Communications. I have the privilege to work with our amazing alumni communities all over the world. Thank you for joining us. I'm also a proud LSA grad from the 20th century. Once international travel resumes, I look forward to seeing many of you in person. Now I'd like to share just a few quick housekeeping items for everyone. And this doesn't mean you should start your vacuum right now during this session. Zoom auto captioning will be used throughout this event. To view the captions, please click on closed caption at the bottom of your right screen, and then choose show subtitle. Apologies, but it's only in English and I can't read any other language. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask questions. To use the Q&A feature, please type your question in the Q&A window at any time during the event. The speakers may not be able to answer all of your questions, but they will try their best, and I'm not even paying them. Now it is my great pleasure to welcome Dalu Chi. Dalu graduated from U of M LSA grad in 2010, majoring in mathematics and economics. She is a serial entrepreneur focusing mainly on renewable energy and artificial intelligence. She is uber smart. She loves to travel and spends her spare time growing the UM community in her hometown of Shanghai, China, as the co-president of the club. I have such a pleasure of working with her, even though it may not be such a pleasure working with me sometimes. Sorry about that, Dalu. And if that's not enough, Dalu is also a member of the International Alumni Advisory Committee for the Alumni Association here at U of M. Everyone, please welcome Dalu Chi.
Wow, good morning. Thank you, Indra, for the introduction. Trust me, it's been all pleasure working with you. Thank you very much. This event brings together two things that are very important to me: the University of Michigan and women in business. I can't wait to hear what our panelists have to say this morning. I graduated from University of Michigan in 2010. Thanks to the interdisciplinary thinking I learned at UM, I was able to start my own green technology consultancy in 2014, bringing together green community planning and with renewable energy. But first, I'm pleased to introduce Steve Grafton, President and CEO of the Alumni Association of the University of Michigan. Since 1994, Steve has provided leadership and direction to the association across all campuses. He is a national leader in the educational advancement field, serving many leadership roles for the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. On a personal note, Steve and his wife, Carol, have two sons who are also alumni. Steve Grafton, welcome.
Thank you, Dalu. It's always great to see you, even greater in person, and I look forward to that. In fact, I look forward to the time when we can all be together again, because it's been far too long. This pandemic is certainly taking a toll in many ways, but one of the things that is most disappointing about it is that it creates, or it prevents me from being able to have the personal visits that I've come to really enjoy, especially around the Pan Asia Alumni Reunion. But it doesn't stop us from connecting with each other, and this today is a great example of that. It's a wonderful time for us to come together and to learn. I look forward, like Dalu said, I also look forward to the opportunity to hear from people associated with the university as academic leaders and alumni, and who are making a real difference in the world and struggling with the things that we're all struggling with. But so their comments will really help us a lot today, I think, all of us. And I look forward to what they have to say. I'm also really glad that my friend and colleague, the Dean of the Ross School of Business, is with us. Scott DeRue is the Edward J. Fry Dean of the Stephen M. Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. He also is the Stephen M. Ross Professor of Business and has been named, this is amazing, listen to this, he has been named among the 50 most influential business professors in the world. Where there are thousands, he's one of the 50 most influential for his work on leadership, team performance, talent management, and organizational transformation. His book, Experience-Driven Leader Development, provides organizations with the strategies and tactics for developing leadership talent in a new world of work. And his research has been published in many top academic journals. Interestingly, Scott is also an accomplished adventurer and mountaineer with successful summits of mountains such as Mount Everest, Denali, and Aconcagua, the tallest mountain in the southern and western hemispheres. He's also led the University of Michigan students and alumni to the highest point in Africa, Mount Kilimanjaro. So I'm really happy to introduce today a guy who both professionally and personally pursues the very highest goals, and he achieves them. Let's all welcome Dean Scott DeRue.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you for your leadership of the Alumni Association and your unwavering commitment to our mission here at the University of Michigan. I am so excited to have a moment to spend with all of you today. I want to, on behalf of everyone at the University of Michigan, send our collective best wishes from Ann Arbor to all of you around the world. I understand there are people from 6 different continents who are joining us today, which is really exciting. This past year has been challenging for many in our global community, and I hope that you, your family, your loved ones, your friends are healthy and doing well. I also want to thank the university team who organized today's event. Their tireless efforts are much, much appreciated, especially during these times when we are often physically distant, but their efforts to bring us socially together means the world to me, and I know to all of you. And I also want to thank our panelists who are joining us today to share their wisdom and their insights. We come together today for what is an important conversation that, in my opinion, is not receiving sufficient attention in our society. We all know that the pandemic has had and is continuing to have an uneven impact on different geographies. Different sectors of our economy are disproportionately impacted, and different segments of our population are impacted in different ways as a result of the pandemic. And today we come together for what I consider to be one of the most important conversations that we can be having about the disproportionate impact of the pandemic, and that is the impact of the pandemic on women in the workforce globally. So let me just give you a few data points to illustrate the disproportionate impact. And I'll give you data points to begin just here in the United States, and simply because I have the easiest access to data in the US, but what we're seeing globally is a similar trend. So in the United States, for example, between February of 2020, when the pandemic really began to hit the United States, between February of 2020 and October of 2020, so not even a complete year, we saw over 2 million women in the United States leave the workforce. And just last month, in January of 2021, we saw in the United States alone, almost 300,000 women in the United States leave the workforce, compared to about 70,000 men. Okay, so that gives you an illustration of the disproportionate impact, 3, maybe 4 times the impact on women relative to men. Similarly, the unemployment rate for women during the pandemic significantly higher than it is for men. Okay, now let's take that impact even further. If you look at women of color during the pandemic, they're more likely to have been laid off or furloughed during the COVID-19 crisis. That stalls careers, that jeopardizes financial security. It amplifies racial inequities in our society. It's also been demonstrated that the pandemic has had a greater impact on the mental health, the stress of women relative to men. Of course, the pandemic is stressful for all, but what our data show is more so for women than men. 53% of women, according to one of our latest polls, indicates that the pandemic has had a negative impact on their mental health, so over half, relative to about 37% of men. Okay, so again, a disproportionate impact. And it's not a surprise. Women in the workforce are, in many cases, simply juggling more balls in the air than men who are in the workforce, which partially explains why they've left the workforce in greater amounts relative to men. And around the world, every day, women continue to face these difficult choices. For example, here in the US, and I understand across parts of the world as well, we have many grade schools who are operating virtually. We have a lack of paid family medical leave. We lack affordable childcare. In fact, a recent poll showed that approximately 1 out of every 4 women around the globe is contemplating what the poll referred to as downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce entirely. 25% of women thinking of pulling back or leaving the workforce. If that polling is even remotely directionally correct, we are facing what I would consider a crisis with regards to diversity and inclusion in the workforce. This pandemic is compounding inequalities that many groups around the world face, and women certainly are one of those groups. It's reaching levels that I believe will have significant long-term consequences. Research shows that the longer a woman is out of the workforce, the more severe the long-term effects on her earnings will be, and of course, how much harder it is to then re-enter the workforce later. In my opinion, this is an emergency for corporations and organizations around the world because we risk losing current and future women in leadership, okay? Unwinding years of painstaking progress that many have worked towards in terms of fighting for a greater diversity in boardrooms, in leadership and organizations around the world, advocating for greater equity and inclusion in the workplace. And our businesses, our economic prosperity, and the social fabric of our society, if this trend continues, will suffer as a result. So how can we move forward? Okay, how can we move forward? We need to find creative ways to support all people within our society as we all face the pandemic, but certainly women in leadership. And that includes policy, it includes new practices. We need allies. We need our culture organizationally to reflect our aspirations. And if you look at our research, we need more women in leadership. Here's a data point that I love. If you look at how regions, countries, states, municipalities around the globe have adapted to the pandemic, here, the regions who are led formally by women in leadership roles. So think leadership roles of nation states, of counties, of cities, et cetera. Women in leadership roles, those regions have handled and adapted to the pandemic more effectively than regions led by men. Okay, so think about that. So to all of our men out there, we should be listening and we should be learning from the leaders in our society who maybe they figured something out, okay? So importantly, we need to lean into conversations like this one today. We need to put our collective wisdom together to think about what are the policies, what are the practices, how do we ensure that the hard work that we have been working towards and advocating for around diversity in the workplace across the globe, that we don't lose steam, we don't lose traction. And so this conversation I see today is a big part of that. So with that is my distinct privilege, my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's conversation, Professor Lindy Greer. If you have not met yet, Lindy yet, I'm sure she will travel with me to Pan Asia in one of our future years when we can all get together. And you will be amazed. She is extraordinary. She's an award-winning researcher. She's an amazing educator. She's the faculty director of our Sanger Leadership Center here at the Ross School of Business at the university. Her research focuses on how do you lead high-performing teams, with a particular emphasis on the power of diversity and the power of inclusion to get the best out of people and get the best out of those teams. Leveraging her expertise and her research, she's deeply involved in our efforts here at the Ross School to be a leader in business education, in creating a more diverse and inclusive business world. And she's on the forefront of that work. And really doing a lot to help us develop the next generation of business talent who goes out and changes the world. She's been published in every top academic journal in her field. She is frequently published in major media around the world. She was recently named on one of these top lists, top 40 business school professors under the age of 40 in the world, which is pretty darn impressive. So with that, please welcome Professor Lindy Greer to the virtual stage. Lindy?
Thank you so much, Dean Drew. It's an absolute privilege and honor to work at an institution where it's great to be a woman. And having a dean who is very supportive of young female faculty like myself coming up means the world to me and so many other women and people of color institutions. So thank you, Dean Drew, for all you do to support this topic. To the panelists today, I am so excited for this conversation. I have been thinking about it all week and just brainstorming because we see things in the news that are hard. At the same time, as Dean Drew mentioned, we're seeing pockets of opportunity and ways in which women are also shining during the pandemic. So I'm really curious today to get to know all of our amazing female leaders on this panel better and to hear your journeys during the pandemic, what you've seen as challenges and also what you're seeing as hacks and solutions, or potentially even opportunities or ways for women to leapfrog into leadership positions because of skills that could be uniquely suited to crisis management and, living through a pandemic. So that being said, I'm first going to open up the panel to have each of the panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to just send the questions that were sent into advance. To go first, how about Alicia? Would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Professor Greer. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here back with Michigan. I think being a Wolverine is something we all hold very close to our heart, and it's great to be here to talk about this extremely important topic. I'm a graduate from the Ross School from 2003. Gosh, that seems like a very long time ago now. Did finance and accounting, did consulting, became chartered accountant, and then found my way to healthcare, which has my heart. So really in the eye of the storm right now for the last year and a half. So really excited to share our learnings, my learnings and journey over the last year with the whole group. I work with Aster DM Healthcare, and we work in Middle East as well as in India.
Thank you. Suman, you want to go?
Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and meet and talk and discuss on this topic with the rest of the panelists. And Professor Lindy, thank you. And Enja, thank you so much for organizing this. I'm Suman, class of 2006 from Ross, Michigan MBA. And post that, I worked with McKinsey for a very long period of time and short stint in pharma. But then last several years, I've been working for Mahindra & Mahindra based out of Bombay. I'm the Senior Vice President of Capital Allocation, and I also look after the strategy for the whole conglomerate. This is a topic that is extremely close to my heart. I'm one of the leaders of the Gender Diversity Committee in Mahindra, and have always tried to participate, and this particular time has really tested us to the maximum. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation, learning from all of you, and hopefully sharing some of my experiences as well.
Thank you. Elaine?
Hi everyone, this is Elaine, class 96, LSNA. Born in Hong Kong, and after graduation I went back home, and actually I started off my career in investment banking, but that didn't last long. And in the past around about 20 odd years, I've actually been doing my own businesses. And the latest venture that I started, it's a Garage Society. It is a Pan-Asia co-working portal, and we currently have operations in hometown Hong Kong, we have Singapore, we have India, and a few Southeast Asian cities. I think for us to be in a community-centric business operation, especially in this part of Asia, it's very important that we try to work together to actually address issues like gender equality, and of course, I have a lot, many more other issues that we can work at. So for the time being, very interested and very happy to see what will come out of the panel. And obviously, it's a good learning opportunity for me as well. So thank you, everybody, for arranging this.
Thank you, Elaine. Marla, would you like to go?
Yeah, hello, I'm Marla Shapiro, and I am clearly the oldest alum on the panel, BA 1990 in economics from the University of Michigan. I'm actually from Michigan. I was born in Ann Arbor when my father was doing his PhD at the University of Michigan. And although I'm from the US, I've been here in the UK for the last 20 years. Like Elaine, I had an early career in investment banking that didn't take, and I spent sort of the next 20 years working in media technology in the US, UK, Scandinavia, and even some consulting projects in South Asia. And I am currently the CEO and founder of Hermesa, which is an angel syndicate, women-led angel syndicate, and we invest in women co-founded startups at early seed stage. And I launched Hermesa in January 2020, which in retrospect was an interesting time to start a new business.
Thank you. It's such an amazing set of experiences and leadership journeys from all of our panelists today, and it makes me very proud of Ross, so go blue. Our very first question I wanted to kick off with today is starting off on the hard part of what are the biggest challenges you've seen women around you in your company facing during the pandemic? Alicia, did you want to kick off this question?
Yeah. Professor, I think, like I mentioned, when healthcare, we've been hit the hardest. I remember in March last year or February last year, when everyone was trying to grapple with this new reality and the shock to the whole world, and everyone still had the opportunity to kind of sit back at home and reflect and think about what is going on. And people were just trying to figure out how to do work from home. Things were a very different reality for us in healthcare. The last thing anyone could do was be at home. Everyone was there, double time, double shifts, trying to figure out how to manage this new beast, this new virus, and having very little information and knowledge. I think it's been incredible to see how healthcare has been managing this crisis. And honestly, we cannot begin to appreciate what healthcare workers go through during this time. So at least within Aster DM Healthcare, when I look, and you've got just again, it disproportionately affecting women, because 70% of all healthcare workers are women. And it has been probably the toughest time of anyone's lives, because you had suddenly women who were people who were extremely exposed to this virus, couldn't go back home to their families because they didn't know what they were taking back home with them. So people who had to sit in fear, not knowing what they're getting themselves into, having the distancing from their own families, not being even look at the support system that they had and be close to the families. And then even under regular circumstances where, like you mentioned, we're juggling so many things, the care network that most of us have as women, our parents, grandparents, the daycare centers, they all kind of vanished overnight. The grandparents couldn't come to help because they were the ones who really needed to be kept up aside. You had the daycare systems that fell through for children. So we actually saw a very, very deep and profound impact, adverse impact that actually came disproportionately on our female workforce. I mean, across healthcare, absolutely, but disproportionately on the female workforce. So it's been a very challenging in that sense to see how our nursing team, doctors all have had to deal with it. And now when I fast forward and look at what's going on right now, you've got to look after regular care, healthcare as usual that needs to continue. COVID has not gone away. And you've got the vaccination schedules across the globe that's come on board. So the pressure on the healthcare system has actually tripled over the last year. And it's not like you've got extra people coming into the workforce at all. If anything, you always have around 10 to 15% of people on quarantine or actually infected with the disease themselves. So I think it's really important we figure out how is it that we can do a lot more with less, because that is really the reality that we're faced with right now.
Thank you for sharing that. It is, if you stand still, particularly even just by healthcare and the impact of women there, it really is heartbreaking. Thank you for sharing what you've seen in that journey. Next up, we have Elaine.
Yes, well, thank you. I think what we're seeing in, I'm speaking for an Asian entrepreneur in the co-working ecosystem landscape. So what I was seeing actually to get started, once we have the pandemic hitting, then there's a lot of work from home and remote working. For people in our industry, being basically real estate people, we need to figure out, so what's next? Because are people not going to work? Are they going to stay around? So that's a lot of actually landscape changes that we need to figure out. And honestly, we're not there yet, but good chance that it's lucky that we are seeing people coming back into work. But going back to what we're seeing in the days when the pandemic was hitting us, I think for the women workforce, what we're seeing in communities around in Asia is obviously the women are much more badly affected. In Hong Kong, Singapore, and also in India, from what I understand, we are in a way slightly luckier because a lot of households do have home help. So there will be people helping out a bit. But obviously when we can't go into work, kids can't go to school. So it's a nightmare for working moms. Like they need to juggle between calls and their kids around, and they needed to do their online classes. In most houses and apartments in Hong Kong, Singapore, they're not like massive houses. So it's really in a way very chaotic. They need to juggle the stress because they need to juggle between spaces, kids, chores, tasks, and let alone they don't have a lot of space. So what we've seen, and there's a key challenge for them, is overall they need to be able to handle in a way everything. And in Asia in particular, a lot of household chores tends to be taken care by the women, by the female. So I think this is the key stress that we're seeing. But again, as I said, we are slightly luckier because we do get help here and there. But obviously, this has to change, to be honest. Of course, when the pandemic is going away, with the pandemic going away, kids going back to school, it's easier for women, leaders, workers overall to get a better sense of how we can handle our time. But in a way, I think we need to do better because things might turn bad again. And in a way, this shouldn't happen in the first place because household chores and a lot of tasks should be handled much better, I think, between genders and between different parties in the household. So I think the overall impact we're seeing, hopefully for the pandemic, will go away soon. But that being said, the troubles that we have seen during the pandemic and the troubles that this is made worse by the pandemic, I think need to go away, and we all need to work on this together.
I can add a point to build on what Alicia and Elaine shared, which I fully agree and echo, and we'll discuss more of that. But a different perspective, a little different angle is also the demand in our businesses. The need for leaning in more into work has only intensified because a lot of the businesses which have been badly affected, say, didn't have enough sales, they are not hiring headcount. There have been tremendous cost cuts, and everybody is working, say, 1.5 times of what they used to work on. So if this is the time when you need to lean in to become, more of a leader, or you need to raise your hand for the promotion or whatever opportunity comes up, this is exactly the time when you're also extremely constrained at home. You have to handle all the home responsibilities. So it's been a bit natural to not lean in or just, somehow maintain the status quo. And this is another area I feel like, this whole gender diversity thing has taken a backseat by several years, but also particularly when you need to lean in for leadership roles, there has been, at least from what I'm observing, there has been a step back when we are thinking about women.
Yeah, those are so many good points. It's just to stand still by how hard this is in so many ways. And to Elaine's story, I can't even imagine being a founder CEO right now as a woman. It's already such a crazy lifestyle as an entrepreneur CEO. And then you throw in the pandemic and remote work and all the things. I am so impressed by all the female leaders out there and all they're doing to still, to Simon's point, still lean in at a time when there's never been more work and more need and balance it all. And so Elaine hinted at something that I'm very curious about for all of us, and just our thoughts on this too, is what is going to be the future of work? Salesforce announced recently that they're going to stay remote for the foreseeable future in some form of hybrid version. And it's a question like, will things ever go back to true normal, or will there need to be rediscussions of things like equity, or maybe a whole lot of new startups that emerge in the household space to make it more possible for us to balance all the things? So the next official question I had that I wanted to stand still by with everybody is specifically looking at remote work. What are the challenges and opportunities that remote work itself has offered women leaders so far? I think first up, I had Elaine for this one.
Sure. Yeah, I think actually it's a good question for me because I'm actually in the industry, being in a co-working business. Well, actually a quick kind of observation of what we're seeing, we're not going to go back to normal. We're going to see a new normal. The new normal we know means a hybrid, if you ask me, between remote working, means a bit of work from home. There will still be offices, but the offices are going to look very drastically different from the offices that we used to say. So I think we as an industry operator are trying to figure out how best to pivot our offering to the new workforce and the needs. And I think the key thing, then going back to the female workers and the leaders, as a female leader myself, is actually to understand how we can not only cater for the needs of the new workforce and the changing needs of how people coming in or not coming into work, it's also to look at how we can facilitate a better work environment, a better work style, not only for the traditional workforce, but because of the increasing, changing, stressful demand of our female workers. So how we try to approach it is if we can do a hybrid between maybe work from home, remote work, and a bit of office work, then maybe we can work in a more flexible way. So we provide more flexibility in terms of work schedules, in terms of work style, workspace. They can maybe even work closer to where the kids go to kindergartens. So I think in a way, this is going to be, it's disruptive in a way because things are going to change really fast. But at the same time, this is the best time never that we can also adapt and provide a better environment for everyone, female workers involved, to take the lead to change the way we can use the new work mode to actually provide more opportunities for female workers too.
I love the positivity of that view. And it is such a great way to think about this, right? That the pandemic's offering a chance to renegotiate across so many spheres of our lives, to renegotiate agreements at home, but also renegotiate our work cultures, even some of the assumptions we have about how we go to work. So interesting. Simon, go ahead.
As long as it doesn't, this is not used as an excuse to reinforce the stereotypes. So this is the issue, right? A lot of women can come to the workforce if this flexible mode happened, but a lot of women may be forced to again become the predominant caregiver because they get access to this flexible mode. Because this is it's a great opportunity, but again, I hope in certain pockets of society or some of the more maybe the little bit regressive places, it doesn't become an expectation that because you can work from now you can take care of everything at home, your kid, everything, and and just do enough, whatever you can do to work from home. So at certain points, while at the entry level or at the beginning of your career, it is a great opportunity. And all of us here are senior women leaders. We know that we have to get out there, we have to network, we have to meet our clients, we have to meet customers. We have to be present in the conversation to get the seat at the table, and that should not go back because of this availability of the option. Whether it is internal or whether it is caused by the society, I do not know, but I'm just saying this is something that we have to watch out for. The higher and higher we go, that it doesn't mean that we can be very happily sitting at home and just doing work from home and never again raising our hand.
So I'd love to follow up on Simon's comments there, because I agree the flexibility is great, right? So I can work when I want, I can work where I want, which is good because in London we've been under lockdown for a long time. So I'm doing a lot of homeschooling. But what we're finding in the UK at least is that, and actually I think it's global, we don't work the same amount of hours at different times. We work all the time. We live at work. We no longer work from home. And so the UK Office of National Statistics came out and said that the people in Britain are working 2 hours more per day. So the pace is absolutely relentless. I have a friend who's a leader, senior leader in a huge global company, and they're globally 30% up on productivity during the pandemic. And he's really concerned about burnout. And then he tells me that he's concerned about his staff's burnout and that he manages his global workload now by sending emails to North America at 10 p.m. because, I mean, they won't reply until midnight. And then it's like, okay, if I'm asleep and don't respond. So if we are putting this kind of pace on men and women in the family, and the work is, the flexibility doesn't mean we work differently. It's just we work all the time. And I think that is the real downside of the flexibility for all of us.
Yeah, I heard a phrase once that women and people of color are the canaries in the coal mine when the work culture is not good. That because there's already a disproportionate weight carried by women and people of color, and then if there is, to Marla's point, overworker problems in the culture, the people that suffer the most, to show the pain the most first, tend to be women and or people of color. Elaine, go ahead.
Well, I think these are actually good points. So what we should actually, Sumana, you're really right. I actually didn't strike me. I was like, okay, I'm trying to adapt so I can offer the female workforce a bit more. But at the same time, by doing so, I'm actually feeding into stereotyping that the women should be doing both. So what we should try to do in a way, it's actually, I need to rethink that honestly again, but what's actually, again, it's important, it will be to advocate, to look at why aren't the men taking care of kids per se. Like, I think that says, but that's not only how, in a way, from what I can do is to shape it, but I think we need to start advocating that the chores, household chores are going to be shared equally between genders. And again, maybe for how I can actually help shape this, the way for people to work, it's we can start nurturing certain habits by shaping the workspace, or actually how we are going to facilitate the new work mode in a more constructive manner.
Alicia, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just adding to what Elaine was saying. You do find out that as women, we have this unconscious bias that we can multitask, and we take great pride in doing that. And subtly what is happening is that men use that as an excuse to say, but I can't multitask. So let me just do this one thing because that's all I can do. So I do really think a little bit of this is caused by ourselves, and maybe, this ability that we've had, maybe evolutionary perspective of being able to multitask is kind of like hurting us. Because we end up doing so many things at the same time. I mean, you're in a meeting, you're trying to organize the things for your children at the same time, do other things. And it really takes a toll on our mental health. So how can we consciously also learn to switch off or focus on one thing? Because I think there is some merit in trying to switch off all this multitasking. It comes very natural to us as women, and I think it helps, but there is a dark side to it, which we all need to be also aware of.
Yeah, you really raise the next question perfectly, Alicia. And it also goes to a question right now I'm seeing in the Q&A, is as we look at things like home and childcare dynamics, what are best practices to protect and promote female leaders right now? I think the first person up for this one was Marla, if you wanted to take a stab at this.
Yeah. So I need to start my answer here by recognizing, that I'm coming from a real place of privilege. I can work from home. I have a partner who can work from home. So I have support and we have income, which not everybody has. And to get to Alicia's point, we're not healthcare professionals. We're like white collar office workers. So we're very, very privileged. But for people who have this kind of work family configuration, I think the pandemic has been absolutely brilliant for upending gender norms and for creating space for women to lead. So I'll just tell a little bit of a personal anecdote. So in our family, my husband has a job and he has to go to the office, and they had a really strict no working from home policy. So he would schlep across London 45 minutes each day, 5 days a week. And I have been an entrepreneur for like the last 10 years, a bit of a portfolio career. And so I had the flexibility. We have 2 children. And so that meant that I did work and I did children. So I was the first call if they got sick. I had to do drop off. If there was a play date, I had to arrange it. And so all of this in my head was taking up space and time when I couldn't work. And so then, and it wasn't great for me, and it wasn't great for my husband, because the kids they like never had enough time with him, and he barely, and in some ways he really didn't know the children. And then the pandemic hit, and it has just been a revelation. Our home life has become so much more equal. We homeschool, we split our work day and our work night to homeschool and take care of the kids. We share responsibilities for cooking dinner. Friends of mine who used to travel all the time are home. They spend so much time with their children, and not a single man or woman in this network here in the UK or Europe who's in this sort of same, dual household configuration wants to change it at all. And so what I've seen from that is not only is this changing of gender norms healthier for families, but it also means that if women have more support at home, we can lead more and lean into work more. Right. And so for me, very personally, I would never have been able to get my business started and get it to where it is in 1 year if it hadn't been for the pandemic, if I didn't have a partner at home taking half of the duties, the family duties. So I think that if companies are really serious about promoting women leaders, they need to treat men and women equally. There needs to be a realization that caring responsibilities, whether caring for your parents or a friend or your children, is not a female job. It is the role of both men and women. And if we do this, if we give people the flexibility to be home, to split caring responsibility, to not penalize them for caring, then that, I think, is what we need for women to lead.
Amazing. Thank you. Elaine?
I think this is, yeah, it's a really good point. I think when we are looking at the work from home, of course, in Asia, it's still a bit more traditional in a way that the women are expected to do more, but things are changing. And as Marla said, home chores doesn't necessarily mean that it can be painful, but taking care of kids also means more time with your loved ones. So if we can actually start nurturing the idea of splitting the roles and splitting the love per se, then I think a lot more can be done. And working from home will be the pivotal point on how we can start actually being more equal in a way, because we both spend time at home, we can both go to work. And as businesses and as business owner myself, I think this is a good time for us to start revisiting again how we offer our workspace for us to be in the workspace industry. And at the same time, as a business operator, then how can we offer the same opportunities for our staff members or for our clients to do work in a more gender equal way per se?
Yeah, I'll come in on that point as well. See, one opportunity that I personally felt, or I'm sure all of you did, is it is a great time to influence on your teams and the people that you work with that, that this is real, that they need to step up at home. So as a leader, I expected my team to come and tell me, hey, I have to do this for the kid today. So can we, be a bit more flexible, have the meeting at a different time? And I took it upon myself to whoever I interacted with to sort of make this conversation normal, which is not really a normal conversation it should be, but it is not in many of the settings. So that was one opportunity which helped. And on the personal front, I think, give up perfection. it was just good enough is okay, good enough is survival is okay. And no, that really helped me through this. I mean, not having household help for a significant period of time and living in India when I had very privileged, but had a staff of 4 coming in and doing everything. I didn't even know what is to be done. So yeah, just good enough was good enough, and definitely lowered the bar on that front altogether to give myself some mental peace during this time.
That's a very important point, Suman. We all put too much pressure on ourselves. But one thing I actually wanted to say on the work from home is, even though, like, of course, in healthcare, we've got everyone working in the units, but you've got 20-30% of the admin staff as well. So one of the best things we've seen is all the boundaries have been blurred right now. So earlier, where we used to only get talent from certain regions and countries, all of those got blurred. So from a business perspective also, it became easier to get better labor, better talent, better resources, more cost effective, and opened up a whole wide audience of people, especially women who earlier would not travel for certain jobs. Suddenly they could say, hey, I can do this job. I can do this in the comfort of my home. I don't need to travel to a completely different location. So we started seeing a lot more amazing talent coming into the workforce. And just like Marla also said, I've seen so many women thrive during the pandemic because suddenly they've set up even just small businesses online, whether it's social media, Instagram, and your voice is heard, and there is a bigger visibility for all of this. And I think pandemic has been a major inflection point for women to kind of have that visibility as well.
Well said. So my next question moves a little bit then into the differences that women may be experiencing based on where they live in the world, their culture, or their identity. And there was also a question that came up in the Q&A that relates to this. What about people in households that don't have home help? So what are sort of the differences you're seeing across cultures, identities, even levels of privilege right now in terms of how women are surviving during the pandemic? Suman, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we have a lot of Asian participants here, but it's a bit traditional, but it's a lot traditional. And in fact, the dual burden is very acute here. Women are expected to step up for, I'll talk about childcare first, right? And when your daycare centers go off or you don't have a full-time help, it is very, very acute. So, I mean, it has hurt everyone. I think people have tried to slow down at the workforce or just taken a significant mental health burden. But the other dimension where we have seen a lot of issues is, the socioeconomic strata. I think more than region, maybe, whether you have money or not to afford some of the privileges has really affected women. So even in our company, there are women from all ranks, from the admin to the senior most people. So while some of us have managed in a very privileged fashion, even though we had to do housework for several months, and then we managed to get back our help, and the robots and everything sort of sorted itself out. But those who are a little bit poorer socioeconomic strata, they have really been hit extremely bad, because the natural expectation that you will do the cooking, you will do the cleaning, you will take care of the child, and somehow you will figure out how to do work. That has hurt a lot of women. I read a survey which says that in India, women do 6 hours of unpaid work every day, and men do on average less than 1. And this was way back before the pandemic. I think today it would probably be double. Yes, men have stepped up, but maybe they've gone from 1 to 3. But the women have gone from 6 to 12. So because the work itself has increased, given you didn't have the help and you don't have the daycare or the schools, physical schools to go to. So this socioeconomic dynamic, I think, has really hurt a lot of women. We have seen it in the lives of our help. I've seen it in the lives of the more junior, younger people in the workforce. Not younger, but maybe those who are not earning as much. And unfortunately, the reality of life is the decision makers are at the top, who are in a very privileged position, right? So whether it be me or it be the other 94, 96% of men in the top 100 in our group. But when the decision makers make choices from their perspective, it has definitely affected like any further improvement in the diversity policy, any support or aid that we may need to give to women, or mental health support, right? So, so this is something that I have myself struggled with is when a company is facing cost cutting, when a company is consolidating, what else can you do to help those who are very disproportionately burdened? I think it's been a big challenge for many.
Elaine, did you want to go?
Yeah, actually, that strikes me to think more about how we can take the current opportunity to reshape the way to work in a way, because we talk about work from home, remote working, I talk about the new normal, and in a way, we are looking at what I usually call as a work-life integrated approach. Like we're talking about extended hours, and even those who had the privilege to work from home, we're working more in a way that you're kind of more expected to pick up the call because people can't get off work anymore because you're just there. So, but with that being the change that we're going to see, then why shouldn't we see how we can also take advantage of the change to shape a way that the men and the women work more equally in both domestic and professional fronts? Of course, it's not up to us to just kind of do it on our own, but we need to start talking about it. And we're talking about a hybrid between work from home, we're talking about remote work, we're talking about office work. Then if we can all look into ways in our big, small entities, international corporates and whatnot, how we can take this chance when we're looking at the new approach. We offer workspaces, we offer like work hours schedules to our staff members. Shall we not put into consideration, because things are going to change, why don't we take an extra step to see how we can also take advantage of the change so that the men and the women get equal chances in both professional and personal fronts?
I'd actually like to ask Professor Greer a question. When we talk about culture and expectations around gender roles, I actually had a conversation with someone I know who's looking for a job in mainland Europe. And she's like, I mean, this woman's so extraordinary, you should crawl across glass to hire her. But she gets asked, oh, you have children. Oh, how old are they? And then the question hangs there. And so she has to tell them, well, actually, I've hired, and it's this real expectation that women either shouldn't be working or that they won't be able to work. And we had actually a discussion about this and about what it means for women in the workforce. And so what she's seeing in Europe, and I've seen this amongst some of our founders who get asked questions about their children and how they can really build a business if there's homeschooling. Like, how is this impacting the ability of women to come back to work? How is this, or to advance in their careers? Because anecdotally, it doesn't look good over here.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. So one, I spent the first 9 years of my career in mainland Europe. And so it is interesting how gender expectations vary between even America and mainland Europe around this. And also law, right? Like in America, we couldn't ask that question of, do you have kids and how old are they? Whereas in Europe, that is still at times legal. So one of the things that's been on my mind lately throughout the pandemic is, on the one hand, female success is more visible, to Alicia's point, like there are more opportunities to serve and women are stepping up. And so there is more visibility of success. And to Marla's point, there's also more visibility of the work being done at home because men are actually in the home now, seeing, to Suman's point, the 6 to 12 hours of work a day. Like there is more visibility. At the same time, whenever there is a change in status, there is more backlash, there is more bias. And also because the visibility of childcare might be bigger, there is a potential, I think, for more bias right now in hiring. You also add in remote work, where people tend to be more uninhibited in their behavior, and you add in stress from the pandemic and the likelihood of using categorizations and biases and heuristics because their brain is in animal mode, in the words of Kahneman, system one brain. There is probably more bias right now than we've faced in a while as a woman coming up in the hierarchy. I think the hope and the positive lining is more companies care about DEI than I've ever seen. Even just within Ross, we have a huge DEI architecture. And so it's been a fortunate coincidence, if you will, of Black Lives Matters. Also for women on the upside is that many organizations right now are looking at policies around equity and inclusion and trying to do work there right now. I teach a lot of those topics and I've never seen more interest in companies. I teach mostly in America, so I don't know what's happening right now in mainland Europe on this, but there's ways I can help. Let me know. I'm happy to go call companies for your friend and be like, this is how you have equitable hiring and how you be more anti-bias and how do you root out all the ways in which we do have bias against women at every step of the hiring pipeline, whether that's recruiting, job ads, where you can have language editors now, which is a really cool invention, or in the interview process itself of having rubrics where you actually have behaviors you rate on 1 to 6 because we've shown from research that's the best metric to use, etc. So as a final question that I would love to turn to now, as we close up, we have 1 minute, which is if you had to give one tip and recommendation to allies and or companies to make it better for women going forward, what would it be?
Get rid of the office. Let people come in 2 days a week, and then everybody can sort out their own lives equitably and per the family, not per a 1950s model of work.
I love it. Elaine?
Well, use this opportunity to change the way people work. I think to create a better environment, a more gender-friendly environment, because this is the time to do it, and it's never been a better time.
Alicia or Simone, anything to add to this? Alicia, go ahead.
Yeah, I think just in terms of the style of corporate decision making and stuff, right? And now everyone's on Zoom, and actually things haven't changed so much where women feel more comfortable speaking up on Zoom than they do when they were in the office. So can companies take up more unanimous decision? I mean, like, it needs to be unanimous decision making. Everybody needs to put in a vote. Otherwise, it's again just those 3-4 voices, typically men who say it. So how do you bring those voices, force those voices until they have the confidence to bring it up? So I think they need to be kind of mandated.
I love it. Simone, final word of the panel.
Now more than ever, EQ and empathy are sort of the biggest determinants. They should be the biggest determinants if they are not of leadership. And this will naturally help more and more women rise to the top. So I wish that this becomes a big part of the decision-making process as we go forward in corporates.
Thank you to all of our panelists today. I learned so much from all of you. I'm so inspired by your insights and journey. Thank you so much for sharing with us and our alumni.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you, Professor Greer. What a tremendous panel this has been. I appreciate your leadership, and I especially appreciate the role that you play at Michigan in terms of making this an issue that begins to work its way throughout the corporate world through the great work of Ross and what you're doing there. I really appreciate that, and the comments that all of you said. I have to say that, frankly, you've challenged me as a man and a family member to step up and do more on my own to make sure that that things are more equal at home, and also as a leader of a nonprofit company to make sure that these issues are considered correctly for all of the members of my team. And so I think it'd be great for more men to hear this kind of conversation and understand what it really means. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's not surprising that we've been able to pull together this great group of powerful women leaders, because you're all associated with the University of Michigan, and that would make you the very best, right? And so thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Another great Pan Asia session we've been able to have today. And one of the beauties of having to do these things virtually is that we are able to connect with so many more people than if we were meeting in Hong Kong or in Shanghai or Tokyo or some specific city, and we could collect maybe a dozen, 12 or 13 countries. That's what we normally do. As Dean DeRue said earlier, we have participants today from 6 continents, 24 countries represented in the session today. What an incredible way for us to bring together the family, learn together, grow together, become better together. And we can continue to influence our society because of each other. And I encourage us to continue to look to each other for that kind of resource. So I want to encourage you to stay connected wherever you are. One of the things that's coming up on March the 10th, you'll have an opportunity to give back to your university. It's Giving Blue Day is what we call it, an opportunity for you to show your support to the university. If you look on your social media platforms, you'll be able to find out more information about this. We love to try to get as many alumni as possible to be engaged in giving back to the university too financially. It's not, frankly, I mean, some people may hate for me to say this, but it's not so much about how much money we raise as it is about giving everybody an opportunity to participate in supporting their university. So think about that, look in your social media and be considering March the 10th. And then I want to make sure you all know that the next PanAsia virtual event is going to be on March the 25th. It's going to be Beyond COVID, and we're going to have an expert panel talk about lessons learned over the last 16 months of the pandemic and what it means for the future. Should be a really incredibly enlightening conversation to think about what's going to be different, frankly, forever as a result of this pandemic, because we know that that will certainly be the case. Again, thanks to our panelists, thanks to the group that put this together. Thank you, Dean DeRue, for your participation today. And most importantly, thanks to all of you alumni who have participated, who stay connected and continue to represent our university in such a wonderful way where you live and work. And we really appreciate you. So let me end today's session with a hearty Go Blue and wish you all safety and health in the months ahead. Take care. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.
Steve, that was great.
Thanks, Uja.
Are we done?
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, take care, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.